Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Retana Wash Process Guatemala from Case Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Case, based out of Ashland, Oregon, and this is our first ever full bag review of one of their coffees. However, we did visit their coffee shop a couple of years ago where we did review one of their Bolivian coffees, and so the things I remember the most from that review were how pretty Ashland, Oregon is. It's one of the prettiest cities I've ever been to, and their coffee shop was quite stunning as well. And another thing I do remember from that review was picking up a donut, as I'm a big fan of donuts, and I really enjoyed that experience overall. So if you're ever out in Ashland, then I definitely implore you to visit their shop and pick up a coffee and a donut. However, I have such little familiarity with this coffee roaster as that might be one of the few times I've ever actually tried one of their coffees, which is kind of interesting because their coffee is pretty easily accessible here, as there are quite a few coffee shops that do carry their coffee pretty regularly, and given that I had never reviewed one of their coffees, I felt like this was a perfect opportunity to do so. This right here is day 27. And recipe we went with for this coffee was a 16.67 to 1 water to coffee ratio brewed at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this coffee best through the Chemex, which indicates a more medium grind. Now, interestingly enough, they label themselves a light roast for the profile. However, this coffee definitely felt a little bit more developed than I think I was expecting. So I feel like maybe the more developed side of a light medium works best for me in terms of this coffee. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 5, first impression, and it was a quite nice first impression, as the coffee came out a bit more clean and sweet than initially expected. Most distinct characteristics were this caramelized aspect that I describe in a lot of slightly more developed coffees. I always say if there's something a little bit more on that medium side, the best thing I typically get from them is when it has this caramelized component to it, whether it be some sort of caramelized nuts, caramelized chocolate, and here from this first impression, it was just a little bit more of this slightly darker caramelized component to it, complemented by a fair bit of sugary stone fruits. So it left a positive first impression. I did note that it felt a little bit more developed than I think I was expecting, so that was interesting from the start. As on day 7, I ran it through the V60 and definitely felt the development within this coffee, as it works out nicely in the caramelized characteristics. The fruits were slightly less clean though, and the cup as a whole felt a little bit more robust, a little bit more bold, a little bit more body, and these weren't necessarily the things I was looking for in this coffee. I was still looking for something maybe a little bit more clean and sweet. We continue on to day 9 as ran it back through the Chemex, and at this moment I was really feeling the more developed qualities. So I was running this through our standard recipe, a little bit more concentrated and a little bit higher of temperatures, and while it was initially clean and vibrant, at this moment it just continued to feel a lot more robust. So I was getting a little bit more of the smokiness, a little bit more of the roastiness from this coffee, and as a result I found that it's probably best to kind of lower the temperatures and see what I might be able to get from it. Day 11, attempted that through the V60 this time, and I was continuing to have issues with the cup, as once again it felt much more robust. There was this really kind of heightened vanilla aspect to the coffee in addition to a very kind of robust smoky chocolate to it. A lot of the fruit aspects that I had experienced in the earlier days were definitely waning, not quite as prominent, so I needed to find a way to bring those back. Day 13, slightly better experience on this day as I lowered the temperatures yet again. The developed aspects to the cup were still dominant, but I was getting a little bit more caramel, so it was interesting because the more time I gave this coffee, the more I was feeling the robust characteristics of it, the smokiness, the roastiness that was within this coffee, and given that I was expecting maybe something a little lighter than this, it was a little surprising. But we continue on to day 15 as I ran it through the Chemex this time, was having difficulty pulling out the fruits. However, the cup felt a little cleaner, and that's the biggest benefit I was having from lowering the temperatures and changing the brew method. Settling on the Chemex was the cup just felt a little bit more clean. Slightly bitter vanilla chocolate within it, and the fruit aspects were subtle, definitely secondary to the more robust characteristics within the cup, but I was beginning to feel a little bit more of them from this brew method, so I continued to lower the temperatures all the way down to about as low as I go, which is 200, 199. Day 18, a little bit more time, ran it through the Chemex this time as well, and it really seemed to help the cup settle, as a lot of the roastiness really started to tone down with a little bit more time. So it kind of peaked and then it went back down. Able to pick out a lot more fruits. This time it was skewing a little bit more on the citric aspect of side of things. Day 21, best day of the coffee since that day 5 initial impression, as it feels the cleanest and sweetest it has been, with so many of the roasty aspects kind of settling. Slightly more sugary fruits, a little bit of this bright citrus in the cup at this time. And here we are on day 27, and I feel like really letting this coffee settle has done it some wonderful justice, because at this moment I feel so much more of the more sugary, caramelized aspects within this coffee, as right now I don't feel as much of the roastiness that I had once upon a time. But again, I'm brewing this coffee at a very low temperature, at a very low concentration, so I think that has helped this coffee kind of settle quite a bit. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And this might be a one-of-a-kind tasting wheel because everything here is either a 2 or a 3, but let's go through it and see if I can highlight some things that are most worth discussing. Sweetness, level 3. Here's the thing, today it's really good, and it's on the higher side of the level 3, and so many more of the roasty aspects within this coffee have definitely settled off, so I could justify a higher side of level 3. If I'm being super generous, I could put a level 4, and given that this is the sweetest I've experienced from this coffee, I wouldn't feel too out of place putting it at that mark. Cleanliness, level 3, a lot of that came from the fact that it just continuously felt roasty, and as a result I didn't have as clear and defined of a profile as I was looking for. Now it's better. I still think it would be a little generous to put it up there at the level 4 mark, so I'm happy with it there. Body, even ran through the Chemex, it definitely still has much more of that robust body, which I can definitely feel like that's justified there. Bitterness, level 3. Yeah, it was a lot of that kind of coffee bitterness, that smokiness from a more developed cup of coffee, but now again, kind of toning it down. It's really improved on this day 27 mark. So sometimes even with a coffee that may feel a little bit more developed, time can do it a lot of justice by really letting the coffee settle. Smokiness, level 3, a lot of the time it was up there. This moment, maybe not as much. I could probably justify lowering both of those to level 2. Caramel, level 3, the most pronounced characteristic throughout. That was consistent from the first time I drank this coffee all the way until the end. Definitely felt it in abundance a lot of the time. Today, most notably, it's probably been the most caramel forward cup of coffee. Could justify that at the level 4. I'm much more happy with it at that level 3 mark. Chocolate, level 3. Yeah, and I'd like to lump the vanilla in there as well, and it was a little bit of that more kind of vanilla extract sort of bitterness within this coffee as well. That did contribute to the bitterness being at that level 3 mark, but level 3 looks good for that. Stone fruit, citrus fruit, interestingly in equal abundance. The citrus has definitely died down. I don't know what that experience was because I had that for a couple of days, but now it's a level 2. Stone fruit I could justify at the level 3. Again, I need to emphasize how this cup on day 27 was much more similar to the day 5 experience than it was to any of the other days. So in that regard, it would be at a higher level. Acidity, it's kind of toned down, so that's fine with me. I don't mind that. And the other things, moderate to level 2, I don't think that they're necessarily worth discussing, as even with a kind of more complex experience, I don't think that they justified really discussing because they were just kind of in small moderation. All right, my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, it was an interesting one because it wasn't what I expected in any regard, but I always say that just because a coffee can feel a little bit more developed, it doesn't make it any less good than a lot of other coffees. With that being said, it's skewed in some directions that aren't necessarily my preference. I wanted more fruit vibrancy from this coffee, I wanted more sweetness from this coffee, and I definitely wanted more clarity. So for those reasons, since I did not achieve those goals, then it wasn't necessarily my favorite Guatemala, but it still had some really nice qualities to it. When you could get this coffee right, it took a little more work than I wanted to kind of get this coffee at a spot that I felt was quite nice. And even by the end, it was something that I said it had a lot more potential going into it than I was able to achieve from the coffee. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, I still find it interesting that they say that they roast on the lighter side of things, because this one definitely didn't feel that way, and I don't know the reasoning for it. Maybe it was just this specific coffee that they went in this direction. But with that being said, it definitely has much more of those more developed characteristics, so think a little bit more body, a little less acidity, and a little bit more of that traditional sort of flavor profile within it. Thinking the chocolate aspects, the caramel aspects, and a lot less of the vibrant fruits that you might be hoping for something like this. But there is a traditional drinking profile that a lot of people enjoy, and I think that's a little bit more in line with it. However, it's not going as far to reach that much more robust characteristic. I think for the most part, though, I'll leave this review at that. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Retana, wash process Guatemala from Case Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.